Everybody, it's the Esau Gorilla, aka Vince. I want to talk a little bit today about the citizenship test. I teach at Adult Literacy League in Orlando, and one of the things I love doing, my favorite thing, is I teach citizenship class. I've probably had about 100 students pass their test, and I've been able to speak to most of them, and I know a little bit about what immigration is looking for. The N400, the N400. When students come to me after failing the citizenship test, this is usually the reason. So for this video, we're going to really concentrate on the N400. Real quick, there are 4 parts of the citizenship test. There's the 100 questions. Those are the civic, I call them history questions. You need to answer 6 of those. You can miss 4. You have to write 1 sentence and read 1 sentence in English. But this is the thing that's most challenging. The reason is there's well over 100 questions in here. And the examiners will ask these questions in different ways. They'll use different verbiage. So a few things that we really want to be totally comfortable with the N400 are these things. Well, first of all, more than likely, they're just simply going to ask you some simple questions. What is your name? Where do you live? Another thing is, when you walk in that room, just assume that everything that is said to you is part of the test. Close the door. Put your purse on the floor. I had a student from Ecuador, and they asked him to raise his right hand, which is a very simple prompt. Well, he got a little nervous, and he did both of his hands up like this, and he failed the test. It's pretty unforgiving on the N400. They're definitely going to ask you, like, where do you live? How long have you lived there? Instead of saying, are you married? There's a very good chance they're going to say, what is your marital status? So be totally comfortable with these words. Absolutely will ask you about your job, and let me ask it about 5 different ways. Are you working? What is your occupation? What do you do for a living? Where do you work, and how do you pay your bills? Now basically that's the same question, but just ask different ways, and that's what they'll do on this. Please remember, the citizenship test really is an English test. Okay, travel. I can promise you they're going to ask you about your travel. On your N400, it goes 5 years. In the last 5 years, how many total trips have you taken outside of the United States? And in the last 5 years, how many total days have you been outside the United States? Please be totally comfortable with your answers. They're going to have your N400, and they don't care if a lawyer filled it out or your husband or wife or friend filled it out. When you go in that room, it is yours. It is your information. You have to respond to it. Now, besides those 2 ways of asking that question, recently one of my students said they asked her, when was the last time you were outside the United States? So please, they are definitely going to ask you about your travel. Be totally comfortable with it. Now, there's probably about 130 questions that you're going to say no. Are you a member of the Communist Party? No. Have you ever lied to a U.S. government official? No. And that's fine. There's one question that I have found that they seem to use kind of as a barometer to test your English. The question is, since you became a legal permanent resident, has there ever been a time that you did not file a federal, state, or local income tax? Well, the answer there is no if you've paid your taxes. What the examiner will do, it will switch the verbiage. Since you became a legal permanent resident, have you always filed your federal, state, or local income tax? Well, then the answer would become yes. So I tell my students, simply say, I always pay my tax. Real quick, why do they use the verb file? Because the IRS, they actually use the verb file. In April, you don't pay your taxes, you file your taxes. So that's one of the questions, and they will ask it both ways during the interview. Another question that people have a little issue with, only because they are so used to saying no, and let me backtrack just for a second. Do not be insulted. They're going to ask you questions that may seem like insulting to you. They're simply going to pick a few questions out of here, okay? And they don't think that you've lied to a government official. They don't think that you smuggled drugs, but they want to know your response. They want to know your response, okay? Now, when we get to the yes answers, this is where people get a little bit confused. I think it's page 21 or 22. It doesn't make any difference. It's towards the end. It's towards the end of the application. And the question is, do you understand the oath of allegiance? Well, of course, you're going to say yes. Many, many times they ask, please explain it to me. Very simple. Oath is a promise. Okay? Allegiance is loyalty, or I'm going to obey the laws of the United States. So this is one of the first yes questions, as is, do you support the Constitution and form of government of the United States? Obviously, you need to say yes. The oath of allegiance will be administered when you become a citizen. The next question that people really get a little confused with, and during my class they all answer yes, and then I ask, well, can you explain it to me? Most of them can't. And the question is, if the law requires it, are you willing to bear arms on behalf of the United States? Okay, bearing arms means carrying and using a weapon. The reason why they use that term, that terminology, the Second Amendment to the Constitution says, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the protection of the state, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed upon. So that's kind of where that comes from. The next question is, if the law requires it, are you willing to perform work of national importance under civilian direction? This simply means to work in a factory. During World War II, many of the men were called to duty, and they asked the ladies to work the factories. They paid them, and they found out they were fantastic workers, and some of the big factories actually, they made a nursery for the babies and for the children, so they would take their children there. Another question that's a yes answer is, if the law requires it, are you willing to perform non-combative services in the United States? This means you're in the Army or the Marines, but you're not fighting, you're support. Now, a couple things that you have to be aware of. Your answer is the key. On this part of the interview, once you say, I don't understand the question, you have failed. So please, please, always simply say, please repeat the question. On this part of the test, sometimes they'll change the way they ask it. Never say, I don't understand what you're saying. They don't mind. They might even change the structure a little bit for you. Now, another thing, I'm going to go back to the marital status. There's 5 of them on here. And one of them is divorced. Now, most of the time, if you say, yes, I'm divorced, the examiner will say, why? They don't want your sad story. All you have to say is, we did not get along. That's it. Another question that's asked towards the end is, well, why do you want to become a citizen? Or why did you apply for naturalization? You can answer whatever you want. Very, very simple answer is, I want to be a citizen. I'm sorry, I want to vote. I want to be a citizen because I want to vote. And really and truly, this year, this summer, I've got more students in my class in Orlando, and that is the main reason. People really want to vote in the presidential election. Just remember, be honest. I had one student who lied. They asked him if he'd been arrested. He said no. Well, you know what? They're on the computer. They're checking your records, and you cannot lie to a government official. Some people are maybe too honest. One lady, they asked her, why do you want to become an American citizen? And she said, I want to get a lot of food stamps and a lot of welfare. Not a very good answer. Maybe she was being honest, but probably not the best answer. Remember one thing, 93% of the people pass this test. So if you do your studying, do your due diligence, and I recommend you go onto YouTube, type in American Citizenship Test, watch the video from the Immigration Services, shows you exactly what's going to happen. Thanks for watching. I'm going to do part 2 on the history questions.